Welcome everyone to our special session with Forage. Today we'll be talking about driving efficiency to maximize recruiting outcomes. We have a really great group of panelists that will be sharing their insights regarding this topic. But really quickly, we want to give you all a quick overview of URX and Forage. For those of you who aren't familiar with URX, we are a community of over 2,000 recruiters and developers of early career talent. We bring together all sides of the early career recruiting industry and host events like this all year round. URX is a part of OneRec, which is the premier community for recruiting leadership. So if you aren't already a member, please join us for free at onerec.com/join. I'll pass it off to Laura, who will be talking about Forage.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Much appreciated. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here as well. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly, and then I'm going to introduce Forage. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Laura Mills, and I very recently joined Forage as head of Early Career Insights. Prior to Forage, I was Cognizant's vice president of Early Career Talent Acquisition for the Americas. And prior to that, I spent 13 years in university relations at EY. And I have some pretty extensive experience in higher ed as a faculty member and an administrator. So now that you know me a little better, let me tell you something about Forage. At Forage, we work with leading employers to create open access virtual job simulations. And in these job simulations, candidates build career skills, confidence, and they gain great visibility into the compelling work that our clients do. I'm going to put that really simply for everybody. Forage creates content that gives rich insights to early career talent. We gather data on those learners, or foragers, as we like to fondly refer to them. And then we use that data to help our clients identify diverse, high intent, in-demand talent. Our clients then get to fill difficult roles, and they're delighted. And foragers get jobs, and they are also delighted. So everybody wins with Forage. So now that you know me and you know Forage, let's turn our attention to today's topic. As Carolyn mentioned, we're going to focus on efficiency to maximize recruiting outcomes. Everybody here probably realizes that as digital natives and a growing proportion of every company's largest consumer market, target consumer market, Gen Z is more valuable and more in demand than ever. At the same time, everybody that's in early career talent acquisition has probably one of the hardest jobs that we've ever had. We're looking at tight labor markets. We're looking at historic lows in unemployment. And all of this has led to a very interesting lack of predictability in the market, as well as predictability of student behavior. We're hearing lots of chatter as early career professionals about increased ghosting and reneges by candidates. Tons of fun for us all when these things happen. This really forces talent acquisition professionals to pay super close attention to pre-joining retention tactics. We've got some fuzzy demand signals coming from our business partners that makes it really difficult for us to plan to execute our jobs effectively, but we have to balance the needs of the business with our best practices in talent acquisition. So we need to make sure that we're seen as flexible and still effective as talent acquisition professionals. And then with all these challenges and the endless sourcing demand and hiring managers demand, we've got lean TA teams. So we need to figure out how to be creative in order to prevail here. So we are happy to bring you two amazing talent acquisition leaders who are going to share their perspectives on maximizing efficiency and how they've been able to succeed, be creative, and build careers for today's early talent. So before I introduce our speakers, which I'm going to move to quickly, I want to let everybody know that they can ask questions in chat throughout the session, or you're all welcome to come on to audio when we open for Q&A at the end of the session. So without further ado, let me turn things over to two of the best and brightest in early career talent acquisition, Brighid Jensen from Visa and Kelley Yamate from Squarespace. Brighid, can you introduce yourself first? And then Kelley, we're going to turn the floor to you for an introduction.
Sure, of course. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, I'm Brighid Jensen. I'm the global head of early careers recruiting and programs at Visa. I do have a global role, so overseeing everything in the US, but also globally. So we have early careers teams in multiple regions across the world. My role spans everything from high school early identification all the way through your traditional internship programs, early career, direct talent, skills-based recruiting as well, apprenticeships, and then rotation programs once new joiners join Visa in their first 1 to 2 years experience at the organization. I'm based in Austin, Texas. Have a bit of a similar background as Laura. Did a little over 10 years of recruiting in the professional services space. And then prior to that, also have a higher education background. So thank you again for having me, and I'll turn it over to Kelley.
Thanks, Brighid. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelley Yamate. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I lead the early careers recruiting team at Squarespace. We are a small high-tech company based in New York City, and I've been at the company for a little over 3.5 years. Currently, the early careers team spans our intern as well as new graduate programs, and we're also looking at those non-traditional early career hires, whether they be external or even internal at Squarespace. And for us, really, our programs, we're continuously looking into expanding ultimately our audience and our candidate base. And thinking about those non-traditional candidate sources, such as those coming from boot camps and not necessarily from those academic four-year programs. So with that, early careers, we are a small but mighty team. And we primarily oversee the recruiting efforts for our interns and new grads we're currently focusing on.
Thank you, Kelley. Thank you, Brighid. We're really excited to have both of you here and to hear from you. So I think I've done a pretty good job of teeing up the challenges that everybody's facing. So let's look forward instead of in our rearview mirror here. So I'm going to alternate questions. We've kind of done the prep, as everybody would imagine. So feel free to throw your questions into chat as a reminder, and then we will open for Q&A toward the end. Kelley, let me start with you today. How is your team leveraging technology and vendors to complement the work that your team is doing? And when you're talking about how you're using them, can you also talk about how you make some of the choices to partner with a vendor or leverage some technology?
Most definitely. So some context at Squarespace, our intern program as well as new grad programs are to a certain degree on the smaller side. This coming season, we are looking at a intern class size of around 20 interns and a new graduate size around 15. So with that, for us, we're really trying to maximize the impact of our hires. And for us, our true focus is really developing those relationships with underrepresented minorities in technology. So with that, we have used for the past few years to great success, an amazing virtual recruiting sourcing platform. And the intention of the platform itself was built truly to connect employers to that underrepresented talent within the technology space. Ultimately, we did decide just based on our hiring expectations for the coming year. We knew that we were recruiting smaller numbers. And it also meant that we were looking at a smaller recruiting budget overall. So with that, we had to make a really hard decision to ultimately understand where we want to invest our time and also monetary value. So with that, we really are looking at partnerships that are really meant to build strong virtual communities. So with that in mind, we were a founding sponsor of ColorStack, and we're entering our 3rd year of partnership with them, which is a nationwide nonprofit student organization meant to really uplift Black and Latinx students within the CS space. So with that, we have decided to really deepen our investment this year, expand our engagement with them, and really, we have the ability to really authentically connect with students. And we really believe that for the organization, they really focus on uplifting the individual. And we see that really in parallel to the Squarespace programs. And so we see these students really succeed here at Squarespace.
Kelley, are there any particular technologies that are helping your team be more efficient?
Most definitely. In terms of technologies, we have been leveraging HackerRank as not only our first line of technical assessment, but also it is the environment in which we conduct our technical interviews. So with that, the beauty of HackerRank, we are able to create our own take-home assignments. And for us, the idea behind it is we want the HackerRank to be as inclusive as possible. So we do think about the time it takes to complete the assessment. We know that student time is extremely valuable. And we also want to stand out. So we believe that the take-home assessments that we've built, that we ultimately change every few years or so, really makes us stand out. And we hope it is actually an enjoyable experience for these candidates.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Kelley. We appreciate that. Brighid, let me turn attention to you. We know that today's early career talent is not necessarily as enamored with technology when it comes to the recruiting process as we would hope. I know that I've gotten a lot of feedback from the candidate pool when I was at Cognizant about wanting to have a more customized experience. So how are you balancing high tech with high touch at Visa? And what are you hearing from your candidates with regards to what do they expect there?
No, it's a great question. And I think obviously technology has been really, really helpful for recruiting teams from an efficiency perspective, and also from an ability to reach, like Kelley mentioned, more diverse candidates, whether, whatever it's from, background, schools, different entry points. And so there's such benefit to technology. But when we look at the data from the candidate experience, and especially within, I would say, the last year, 2021, 2022, we are seeing overall from the early talent population, Gen Z specifically, less engagement in the recruiting process, and what the data is showing that it's due to how much is coming at them from us as employers. So we all have these great technologies, whether it's Forage or Ripple Match or Way Up or HackerRank or whatever it may be, right? There's a lot of good ones on the market, but it's so much noise and so much what candidates expect is coming at them, to the point that they just are like, this is too much. There's a lot of noise in their life in general. There's a lot of technology in general, and it's overwhelming, and frankly has led to a lot of stress. And we all know a lot of the data on mental health with Gen Z and kind of where that is. So we have to be really thoughtful of not adding to the noise of just like the employment noise, another employer getting lost in the mix. It's really easy to do that, and to do things when we're messaging students or reaching out, especially in a virtual way. But I think this goes for live on campus recruitment as well. To just not just compound it, because it's not healthy, it's not productive, it's not efficient, it's not smart from a cost perspective of just being more of the same messaging. And so we, at Visa, think really, really intentionally about our messaging to candidates and making it as customized as possible. One, to reach the candidate, but also to talk about things that are unique to our company that only Visa can talk about. So whether that is, our crypto program, or maybe there is some new co-branding partnership that Visa is doing. We just announced one with Samsung and a specific bank in Singapore. That's something that Visa can only talk about, and it's interesting, it's relatable, it's different, it's impactful, it's bite size, and it is not necessarily overwhelming. It's something that's going to add to a candidate's just repertoire of knowledge, whether they choose to engage with Visa from a career perspective or just choose to be more knowledgeable about fintech or the payments industry. So I think being specific and really intentional, that takes effort and time, and it's hard. It's not the easy go-to like resume review, or let's give you tips on how to get through an interview process. A lot of companies can do that, but I think all of us as employers need to think about when we're reaching out to make sure it's worthwhile, both from an efficiency perspective for the company, but also for what is going to be best for our candidates, and giving them something extra that feels personal to them. And you can do that in a really good way. So still get that personal touch, but it also is personal to the company, and trying to find, it's magic. It's not always perfect every time, but some planning, some intentionality, and really knowing your company, and understanding what students, your candidate pool wants to hear is really important in that outreach, through technology.
Make a great point when you talk about giving the candidates something as part of the process. I know that Universum Data talks about top interests in today's early career talent, and learning, bringing something back from each experience is one of the top characteristics that we're seeing climb higher and higher on Universum's list every year. So smart idea. I heard bite-size, I heard intentional, I heard not to overwhelm, I heard customize. You guys are working it. Let's talk about distributing work on teams. So Kelley, what roles do you have defined on your team, and how have you designed the workflow so that your team can be efficient?
Definitely. So, like I said, Squarespace, we are a small but mighty team. The early careers team consists of 3 individuals, including myself. So we have 1 additional early careers recruiter and then a recruiting programs lead. We also, just in assistance, we do have 1 recruiting coordinator who is from our centralized RC team at Squarespace. So with that, really for us, we really want to become those talent acquisition partners to our stakeholders. So with that, to really ensure that we're deepening our relationships with our hiring managers, as well as our candidates, the way our myself and our other recruiter is aligned, we ultimately own end-to-end the recruiting cycle for specific roles by department. So I primarily oversee our engineering hiring, and the other recruiter oversees our non-engineering hiring, which includes marketing, product, design, and creative. So with that in mind, we also have our recruiting programs lead, who is really responsible for that really robust experience side. So that includes our intern program experience, and then events that span from recruiting events, brand awareness events, as well as overall recruiting partnership events. And so with that, myself and the other recruiter, we work extremely closely with her in ideating on really bespoke event ideas, not only internally for our interns, but also externally. So with that, really thinking about the efficiency, because both myself and the other recruiter are those full cycle recruiters, we are the first face to a candidate, as well as one of the last, as the one ultimately extending that offer, and then really welcoming them to Squarespace. And we do, as recruiters, really stay in the picture in the onboarding stage. So within the intern program, we support them as mentors through the entire 12-week experience. And then as new grads, we also kind of assist them in their early months at the company. So with that in mind, for us, we really believe that by being that full cycle recruiter, we're really building those strong relationships from the get-go. And I think that also then just really reflects in that candidate sell and ultimately retention of that individual.
Retention, that's the word we are all looking at these days, right? I'm going to ask you both the next question. Kelley, I'm going to ask you to speak to it first. What are you guys doing to encourage idea generation on your teams? Idea generation to help improve impact, help improve efficiency. Certainly finding time to put ideas into action is pretty tricky. So what are you also doing to help people make time to try new ideas?
Definitely. For us, we are consistently thinking on an annual basis after the conclusion of a recruiting cycle on what worked well and what didn't. And, for us, we have the ability to make recommendations to our stakeholders, and we have autonomy to really pursue new ideas, which is fantastic. With that in mind, we have, of course, faced certain constraints. So there are, of course, certain platforms, certain partnerships that we have on an extremely short list that we're really excited for a potential future partnership. But in the meantime, we're always thinking about how we can iterate off of the existing recruiting strategy and really make those impactful changes. For us, knowing our constraints, sometimes it means budget, sometimes it also means on our engineering side as well, our stakeholders, they have limited bandwidth. So for us, we've been actually really lucky to leverage a company-wide offering that we have. We do host a company-wide hack week on a biannual basis. And so what it means is everyone, not just engineers or designers, are able to participate. And we have been able to really look in the early career space and partner with interviewers, with hiring managers on really ensuring that our interview practices and processes are the most not only efficient, but also inclusive. So a great example, a couple hack weeks ago, we came in with a really ambitious problem to solve. We wanted to make our HackerRank take-home assessment more inclusive. With that in mind, over the week, the project really evolved into something a little different. We were able to interview either former interns at Squarespace, former intern leads, as well as interviewers to really understand the intrinsics of candidates who are really successful at Squarespace. And we were able to make a few adjustments to our HackerRank, but more importantly, actually our takeaways from that week have really influenced the way we conduct debriefs, as well as how we assess candidates in that next round of interviews and the technical interviews that we host. So
very nice.
Year over year.
You're doing quite a bit year over year. So good for you guys. I hope that you're finding the time to put some of this into it. These hacker weeks sound like a great space to do that. Brighid, can you answer from your perspective too? What are you doing to encourage your team to be innovative, and how are you helping them find time to actually put ideas in?
Yeah, no, great. Well, a lot of similar things to what Kelley mentioned, but also for us, innovation starts at the top. I mean, it's a key fundamental goal of our CEO and our chief people officer. And so we bake it into all of our goals. Now, it's one thing putting it down on paper every year and saying, I'm going to be innovative. It's another thing actually doing it and creating impact with the innovation. And so really focusing on any ideas that come about or any creation. It's just not innovation for the sake of innovation. It's what is the impact that it's going to have. And it's easy to have a ton of different things happening, but if it's not interconnected and it's not driving the strategy and frankly the growth of our business, then that's not going to have impact for us. And so we're selective about our innovation. I want to start with that rather than just rattling off a list of here's all the things we're doing. We could do a lot of things. Let's be really, really specific about what it is and then put all of our efforts there. So that's one. Two is we do have cross-functional projects, similar to what Kelley mentioned, where whether it's our sourcers, so we divide our team up into kind of specialty areas. So we have the sourcing side, which is your school recruiters, all of the sourcing, whether it's digital sourcing or alternative pathways or whatever, that's a team. We have traditional recruiters that are doing assessment to onboarding, and then we have programs teams. And we break out 10% of everyone's role on every recruiter, every recruiting coordinator, every program manager. 10% of your role has to be in cross-functional projects that are outside of your role. And the reason for that, one, is to benefit everybody's own development and career growth, but also is to drive innovation so that folks that aren't doing recruiting work every day can come in and look at it from a different perspective and say, hey, have you thought of this? Or what about this? Or maybe this will work. And it really does. I mean, it's the tried and true, bring diverse teams together, and you're going to more than likely create better results and drive innovation. So that's one. And it's built, that 10% isn't just helping out or extra, or be really good if we had some, more hands to do this work. It's built into their performance metrics. And I could talk about that in a little bit. The second thing is at Visa, we have something called Go Shares. And it can be anything from 10% of someone's job all the way up to a full-time kind of rotational placement. And that's through the whole company. It could be global, it could be regional, it can be a talent person moving and doing a Go Share in the finance department or in cybersecurity. So it's a really cool opportunity to continue to innovate and to drive kind of the innovation muscle. So I have had Go Shares on my team where we've had, for example, someone from our sponsorship group, our marketing and sponsorship group, come in and work on one of our Black Scholars program, which was really phenomenal. And she ended up bringing a ton of marketing, global sponsorship expertise, and really, really helped elevate the brand of the program. I have had people on my team, recruiters, go and do Go Shares in finance. And then they came back and ended up rehauling our whole budget process, which was amazing to me, and she's still doing a fantastic job at that. And we had a recruiter that went and did a Go Share in our UX team, so within the business, and that ended up turning into a full-time total career shift opportunity for her. And so some of it is bringing innovation back, some of it is also driving innovation into other teams, throughout the organization. So I think there's a lot of different elements and ways you can go about it, but it really is just thinking, like I said, of the muscle of innovation and how to continue to pour into it and strengthen it.
I want to go have a Go Share.
I know, right?
Sounds amazing. Bridget, I'm going to stick with you for our next question. When you think about how you're measuring success, what metrics are you focusing on, and how closely are those metrics being followed by the leaders of your organizations? One thing for you to be doing it within your group or even within talent acquisition. How far up is this being seen?
Yep. It's a great question. I mean, I think when I think about recruiting, and I'll kind of stick to that because I could say, is it the people metrics, is it the global metrics? But we'll talk specifically at the early careers team. There's the tried and true metrics that I know we all try to kind of rethink all the time, but at the end of the day, they're tried and true metrics for a reason. So things like your funnel rates, your accept rates, right? Which is really measuring your productivity. It also is measuring the health of the pipeline. And so it's about the person, but it's also about kind of the market. We follow those pretty tightly. And it's less about an individual has to do, X amount and X amount of time, but it's a more of kind of a team metric, which I think is really, really important. Then we have things like candidate NPS scores, so net promoter scores, and also hiring manager net promoter scores. Those are in evolution for us right now, but that is to make sure that we're thinking about the experience, right, of our stakeholders, our candidates, also our, our internal stakeholders, the business. We have employee pulse surveys, which for me is a metric for me, right? How is my team satisfied as an employee at the company? Because that's going to determine how they're, selling the organization to others. So that's one that I'm held accountable to, and the other leaders on my team are held accountable to pretty closely. And then some time to fill, things like that. But I think it's important that there is some flexibility. So when you're talking about how closely do you stick to those, there's market volatility, right? You talked about it. We've talked about the fuzziness in the market. There's, especially last year, and I think even going into this year, there's definitely amount of uncertainty in the work that we do. And I'm glad that we're getting to a place where, we can move on the 80%. I think with early careers, it used to be where you had to have everything packed, loaded, ready to go by, August 15th. And then it wasn't going to change after that. Our leaders have, because of just the market being through it, the world we've been in the past few years, I've gotten to a point of saying it's good. Like, we're good with 80%. And so I feel that same way about metrics of, we have it. We need a framework. People need to know and understand what they're going to be held accountable to, but there still needs to be an element of this may change because of factors we can and can't control, and let's evaluate them quarterly or monthly, depending on kind of the changing elements. I would never want to hold someone accountable to something that simply was out of their control because of a market shift or a huge macroeconomic shift. So to me, that latter part of the question is how accountable? Well, it really depends. It depends on what's happening. But we all need to understand that there's an agile nature of the work we do, and that we're not going to be unreasonable to hold folks accountable to something that's, that's nothing that they did.
You bring up some good points there, the fairness in your metrics, that's important. Want to just quickly key in on one piece. How far up are these metrics being watched within the organization?
So we have kind of some leadership metrics that every single person at the organization it's the leadership principles of Visa, and everyone across the entire organization are held accountable to those. So those ones go all the way up. The ones that are more recruiting metrics, I would say, end up compiling into the broader global TA pool. And we do report out kind of early careers, professional recruiting, exec recruiting a little bit, but those metrics are held at more of a macro level, unless there's some kind of issue or some, a flare up of somewhere where we're having just, struggles, and we need to hone in. But from the leadership principles, and there's 6 of them, and like I walk around with them. I mean, that's how much they're built into our reward system, our recognition system, and also our, quarterly kind of evaluations of talent and performance. So those ones are high. Again, like CEO down.
It's in my mind always great when you're going to get the highest level of visibility to the work that you're doing. I know some people get a little nervous, but I think the invisibility is more harmful than the visibility, personally.
I agree.
I'm going to move us to one more question, and I'm going to ask you both to answer. And Brighid, I'm going to ask you to answer first. You referenced some of the rocky waters that we've recently steered through. We have gone through a global pandemic. We've all heard about the Great Resignation, which apparently has turned into the Great Regret. There's quiet quitting. It seems like the press is coining a new phrase that is going to touch our industry every day. But even though it's been challenging, we've been innovative, or we wouldn't be here, right? We're all considered leaders in our space for a reason. So we innovated, we developed new ways of doing things. There are tips and techniques that we've all learned having gone through these past few rocky years. So out of all of the machinations that we've all had to go through, what parts are you going to keep on a go forward? What parts of that reaction to the unexpected actually turned into something good that you're going to keep going with?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. There's part of me that thinks, wow, it's really cool that recruiting is on the front page of the news all the time. I mean, 5 years ago, no one had news articles about recruitment
tight labor
and
market
talent.
and low unemployment rate, I think.
So I'll take it, right? It may be a little weird, and I tend to be like, everyone hones in on me at dinner parties and things, like, oh, what's going on, as if I know every turn of the market. So it's cool to be on the front page for a little bit, but I would say what I would keep is it, and would hope the teams that I work with keep, and I think anyone in the industry, is a shift in mindset of, and it really is a kind of reiteration of what I mentioned earlier. We're okay knowing about 80%, and we need to expect it to change on a dime. And we're strong enough. We have the muscles. We can do it. We can pivot. It's not this like, oh gosh, like, what are we going to do in this big contrast? We've done this before. We're going to expect change. And every day I wake up saying, yeah, something may change. That's fine. Like, we've come this far. We're in a better spot in many ways. And kind of the confidence of like, we can kind of get through any shifts and change. And a lot of the shifts and change aren't happening at us. We're happening with them. And I think probably when the pandemic happened, there was a lot of like, oh gosh, this is happening to recruiting. And now that we've made it through successfully, many companies in a better place than they were from a recruiting perspective. I think we're now say, look, we're a partner at the table with the business as we're moving through change, rather than being reactive. And I think we earned a lot of respect with the business. I think we are now very much in an advisory place. And so to me, we're advisors. Advisors understand things change and shift. let's ride the waves together rather than, you know, the waves kind of pounding on top of us. So for me, that's all about mindset. And I like to celebrate and reward that kind of success through ambiguity. So as much as we can do that and reward and recognize the folks that are like, I don't want to say just going with the flow, but navigating in a strategic way. To me, that's a really good thing to celebrate and reward. And then finally, I mean, we just need to have fun. Like, honestly, recruiting it's fun. It's really amazing work. It's something that we're really blessed and fortunate to do to help, you know, students, you know, make their dreams come through. I was sitting in a parent panel at school with a bunch of 5th grade parents, and they were like, when your children are 22, what do you hope for them? And every parent in the room said that they get a good job. And I was sitting there thinking, I get to do that. I get to make these dreams come true every day of my life for all of these parents. What a gift, right? And it's fun to do that. Yes, it's stressful, and yes, there's pressure. But if we lift up and remember the true meaning of what we do, I think that has really come through in these challenging times. I think, you know, we keep that and we're going to continue to thrive.
Here on the gift of being able to give somebody a career. It's what fuels every day for those of us that are doing this. So yeah, amen to that one for sure. Brighid. Kelley, let me turn to you. What are you going to keep after having to react? We've reacted so long and we don't have to react so much anymore. What are you going to keep though out of those reactions?
Yes, most definitely. Well, just to piggyback off of Brighid, the past few years, we really have come to expect the unexpected with student trends and just the rapid changes that we're seeing in recruiting seasons. With that, in terms of takeaways, I think one, just going through the pandemic and keeping that camaraderie within such a small team, we have been able to really celebrate the small wins. And, for us, I think really reminding ourselves the work that we do, how it really impacts the hires. For some of our hires, this is potentially their first 6-figure salary within their entire family. So for, so many of our hires, it really is life-changing circumstances. I think for us, just in terms of what we will keep, we have over the past 2 years really made stronger connections with our hires, and of course, have really continued to develop our relationships, past just the hire stage, and we really are that additional supporting figure in their first few years within the early career space. And so for us, it's really rewarding to see them really succeed and have the ability to make an impact on our company. But we also really want to continue to invest in the mentorship and really building that community once they join the company.
It sounds like we're all feeling the blessing of being able to help somebody through what is it's not an intuitive process, right? So good for you to be there as well. It's a great space to be in. And thank you both for entertaining my questions. I'm now going to ask you to entertain the questions for the rest of the participants. So just as promised, everybody can either come off of mute and ask a question, or we've got a couple of folks that are monitoring the Q&A. I'm going to open up the Q&A myself right now, and let's see what everybody has as a question. We've got one. With the recruitment space constantly changing, how do you manage hiring managers' expectations? We touched on this ever so slightly when we talked about the fuzzy demand signals and then having to balance flexibility with expectations of getting things done. So how are you guys managing those expectations?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. Education, 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 over and over and over again. And I know it gets old because it's like, I already told them, or we already sent out that email, and didn't they? We are advocates of our process. We are advisors, and advisors have to educate, re-educate. We're consultants sometimes. Sometimes we're friends. Sometimes like we're therapists, I feel like, with these hiring managers. And so we just have to have patience in saying that either whether the same things over again, or being okay to say, hey, I know I told you last week it was the XYZ, the confidence in saying that has changed, or even maybe even through the education of here's what I know today. given the factors, there's a chance that this could evolve and change. And so they're going to have expectations that, my favorite is always the hiring manager that's like, go find that source where no one else is and hire their top talent. I'm like, and I just make a joke of saying, oh, so you don't think like all the other companies have already found those like diamonds that are sitting out there? I mean, it's like, if like, it's come on, right? So we always kind of joke and there's like this, oh, okay. And then we move forward. So I do think the education and frankly, the transparency of we're doing everything we can. Here's what's in place, but recognize the elements. And if someone isn't, reading the news or watching, understanding what's going on, like we can lead them to that, but that's their choice to digest it. And so the last thing I would say is don't take it personally, just keep on educating.
So is that hiring manager's name Ponce de Leon? And did he find
I know, right? I mean, it's like,
okay.
yeah, there's, everyone thinks there's this like golden trove of candidates just sitting, waiting for us to show up. So I always kind of joke.
Yeah, it's the golden bucket at the end of the rainbow.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I've always said to my teams, say it, and say it again, and smile the whole time. Kelley, what about you? How are you managing these expectations with the constantly changing landscape?
Yes, we are all about transparency, whether it be pipeline metrics or being to a certain degree kind of those student whisperers, understanding real-time student trends. We really leverage our existing, kind of recent new grad network to hear from them directly on what they're hearing from their friends, their peers, who are still in school. And, with that, we are able to then go to our stakeholders and, present the data. And, with that, and we are all about numbers. And so for us, as long as we have supporting numbers, data, metrics, we are always able to get that buy-in.
So I'm taking away transparency, education, constant communication, a lot of good techniques that you're both leveraging. Carolyn, any more comments or questions in the chat, or is anybody interested in coming off of mute to ask a question? Oh, I've got one here. Somebody wants to know, what's been the biggest shift for you when hiring Gen Z? So as we look at the current generation coming, what shifts have you had to make in order to attract Gen Z versus previous generations? This question is being asked by my colleague, so I'm going to tease her a little and say that you're assuming we have that many years of experience, but we're all just babes in the wood.
What we've observed recently is students, are no longer necessarily relying on their departments or career centers to gain access to employers, which to a certain degree is wonderful to us. It means that we have wider access and a wider breadth available to us. But I do think it's interesting to see, to a certain degree with department support, as well as career center support, there is education as well that sometimes just isn't necessarily there. So we're seeing, I think different student behavior appear. More recently, we've seen an unprecedented number of student reneges on already accepted offers. And for us at Squarespace, with such a small program size of, say, if we're looking at a class of 20 interns, if we have one or two reneges, we potentially are losing 5 to 10% of our overall intern class. And last year, we did have an intern renege extremely late in the process, about 2 weeks before their start date. So with that in mind, I think it will be really interesting to see, the evolution of, how students are leveraging those on-campus resources. And, I think we'll see, especially just the overall market trends. We potentially may see reneges go down this coming year. But on the Squarespace side, we are ultimately preparing for any and every scenario possible.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Um,
going to say Gen Z reserves the right to change their mind at any minute. And some of that isn't what we see with reneges, right? I think that also is when you're following kind of the monthly, quarterly trends of candidates, employer, what they want from an employer attributes. It's bouncing all around, right? I mean, you're seeing some of the standards like compensation, right? That's always going to be at the top, but some of the other ones of, like innovation or training or, longevity, career pipe, like it's just interesting. I feel like a lot of what they want an employer is moving with probably the trends of the economy, with just how the contracting and the growth and all of that. And so it's like, well, I thought I wanted this, but now I want this. Well, now this is important. And just kidding, when I told you that I was interested in XYZ, I'm actually interested in ABC now. And so I mean, it's kind of fun, right? I like that they are willing to try a bunch of different things, but it is difficult for any of us to pivot so quickly, especially on messaging. And we can all speak to all these different elements, but it's just which one do you put first and second and third? And I think that is what's been bouncing around a bit. So it's, yeah, I mean, they're going to change their mind and we know it. And but I also think that we still need to be true to who we are as a company and what works for us, and be okay to say you're going to change your mind a bunch. Like, you either know this is what we're about or it's not. So like, it's either for you or it's not, right? And I think it's okay to have some of those hard conversations with students. Ultimately, they're in a better spot and we're in a better spot by going through those conversations.
Yeah, I know that when having those conversations with hiring managers, there's often a lot of emotion and hurt feeling involved. And the reality is, when you start to move forward to the retention rate, you really want somebody who wants to be there. So
Yep.
making that choice there is a money saver in the long run. I know that this generation is definitely so affected by geopolitical and other external sources that we haven't seen as being as influential on generations previous. We've got one more question, and I think this will be our last one as I look at timing here. So someone would like to know, speaking of reneges, how are you managing expectations and communication with your internal stakeholders when it comes to reneges?
Kelley,
Since
do you
I
want to go?
brought up the topic, I am more than happy to share. We have been extremely transparent in last year's experience with our stakeholders, and we have, to a certain degree, built that into our headcount strategy for this coming year. I think more so, we have really tried to evolve our sell strategy after an offer accept. So with that in mind, the idea is that we're building that, whether new grad or intern community, much earlier than in years past. And I think more so in years past, we have really tried to embed our new hires before they start into the company and have them get to know various employees. But something that we will be doing differently this year is really creating that peer community beforehand. So we're hoping that that potentially changes the situation.
Brighid, what are you
Yep.
guys doing at Visa to make sure everybody's on the same page?
Everybody's going to walk through the
Something
door.
that nobody's on the same page with.
Right. Well, again, some of it is providing the data, right? What I mentioned I'm going to keep repeating myself, going back to the education piece of what we're educating whether it's hiring managers or stakeholders on internally, is also the trends of this generation. And some of them know it because they have children or nieces and nephews or whatever around the same age. Others don't. And so, so stating some of that. I'm fortunate because I have a global role. We do a lot of recruiting in India, and it's very, very common, has been for a very long time, for there to be 10 to 20% people that just don't even show up on day one. Like, don't even and it's just built in, and it's part of how the market works there. And so I always kind of use that data of saying, well, at least it wasn't 10% of the class, right? And that's what we see in India. And here's how that team by the way, our team, manages through that. And some of it is, Kelley, to your point of overhiring a little bit. Some of it is keeping some additional pipeline a little bit warm. The good news is kind of back to some of our efficient technologies. You can do a backfill hire pretty quickly, assuming it's not, prior to any of the onboarding deadlines and whatnot. And so we're clear about that, but we also say with our hiring managers, again, in the transparency and the education processes, look, as we get closer to the start date, the ability, to address any reneges is going to be, going to become a little bit more difficult. So let's invest in a really, really good keep warm strategy. And oh, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, that involves you as well. That's not just something that recruiting does. It's something that we do with the business.
Yeah, partnering from planning all the way through to execution. Absolutely. 100% agree. So that was our last question. I want to thank Brighid and Kelley. And I know Carolyn's going to flash a closing slide up here. You guys shared such wonderful, useful information. On the closing slide, you're going to get to see some great info about the URX Leaders Summit. And while you look that over, I just want to take a quick moment to share that Forage is hosting our second annual Connect Summit. And our event brings together the brightest, boldest minds and early talent across the industry. The event is free of charge and it runs virtually for 24 hours, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time on November 3rd. This gives us a chance to engage with our global audience of participants. So we hope you'll join us, anybody who's with us today. My colleague Caitlin has put the registration link in the chat. And I want to again thank Brighid and Kelley and URX. Thank Brighid and Kelley for the amazing insights, URX for the opportunity to bring together this great group. And I want to wish everybody a wonderful day.
Thank you all so much for making time to join us. Thank you, Kelley. Thank you, Brighid, for your incredible insights. And Laura, you did an excellent job moderating and keeping the conversation flowing. So thank you all so much for joining. If anyone is curious about the URX Leaders Summit, this is our first time hosting it in person. For the past few years, it was virtual. So we are really excited to be welcoming leaders and executives of early career talent to the Bay Area for a summit in December. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.